Okay, so I think I'm gonna make three different presentations because it looks like this year they're cutting them off at 40 minutes. So I don't know why they did that because I know my older ones aren't cut off at 40 minutes. But anyway, so before this one cuts out, I'm gonna go over the assignments for today. So there's the two assignments, assignment one and assignment two. Assignment two has some data. We'll talk about assignment one first, though. So assignment one is pretty much kind of what we were doing. Um, as an example, those last three data sets that we went to. So what I want you to do is to go find two web maps in the wild. And what I mean is that are actually on the internet. And so create a post on on the assignment forum. I forgot to create this, so I will create it. It's not created right now. Don't worry though, because I can't do it right now. Um, so go to Blackboard, and what you need to put in on this forum is the URL for your map, so that I can click on it and copy and paste it and look at it myself. Then you need to look at the map and find out. Um, tell me about what the base map is, what the thematic layers are, and if there are any interactive elements on the map. Because that's, as I said, we're working towards your final project in this course, and you'll need to have those three elements. That's one of the minimum requirements, is that you have a base map, you have thematic layers, and there are interactive elements on the map. In other words, it performs some sort of GIS function, even if that GIS function is as simple as querying the information. Okay, now this next part may be a little bit challenging, but I want you to attempt it, and that is to use the the um, the tools. What are they called? Developer tools to figure out what servers are being used to display, particularly the base map and the thematic layers. I don't necessarily care about any of the other information that's on there. And for right now, if it's vector data that's being displayed, just say it's vector data. We're gonna get into that real quick, so you don't need to say where that's coming from, because sometimes it's a little harder to tell where it's coming from. Um, all right, so use that to figure out where the base map's coming from and where the thematic maps are coming from. Okay. Yeah, so you might figure out the tiled base map pulling from, just give the URL. If it's, sometimes the URL can be pretty cryptic. Sometimes it could be pretty straightforward, like Mapbox or CloudMate or even ArcGIS Online. That's enough for the assignment. You don't have to go into further details about how their files are made or their file structure. Like, you don't have to explain the tiling scheme that I came up with, or that I talked about, or anything like that. All right. Now you have 2 weeks to complete this. This one might be a little bit easier to do next week. The software and programming framework used to build the web app. We're going to talk about programming frameworks next week. So I would just like you to, at this point, hold off on that. But even next week, even after we've gone over programming frameworks, just try to take an educated guess as to where you think the data, what kind of software is used to create it. All right. Suggestions on how the map administrator can make the map more useful for faster performing. Again, that might be something that you hold off again till next week. All right, please make an effort to find these maps on your own. Okay. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay, so I think that the map, do the computers down here have Chrome? Okay.
So that's just that one on Chrome?
Yeah, so if you go to Developer Tools in Chrome, that's how you get to it. If you're in Firefox, which I don't have loaded on my laptop here, but
I found it in Firefox Explorer.
yeah,
Firefox.
Explorer does have the ability nowadays, but it used to not have the ability, and you have to uh, it doesn't like update automatically. You have to reload the page to get Internet Explorer to show up. So I'd recommend not using Internet Explorer for that, but Firefox and Chrome both have a pretty good debugger in them that shows the console. Here, I'll go through because I know it kind of not not talked about what each of these does, but um, right now we're going to actually not right now, but in a few seconds, we're going to start talking about this one. This elements basically lets you look at the HTML for the page. So what HTML was used to create the page? And as you highlight an element, which is a thing on the page, thing's not very descriptive, but I can highlight over this thing. So this this thing is pretty much the whole page. But as I get down here into all these nested elements, at some point I can start, like here's the map portion. Um, and I can get all the way down and look at all these various things. And it's pretty complicated. There's lots of things. Your web map probably will have, you know, a title, some controls like maybe the slider bar, uh, and some other information and a map. So you may only have 5 or 6 elements. Okay. Console, um, this one will be more used to you when you start using JavaScript. Um, JavaScript is the programming language that helps you make the elements on the page dynamic. It lets you change things on the page. And so the console basically tells you when the code did something that was unexpected or causes an error. Those are the red here. In other words, it tried to get this resource, but it never got it. It timed out eventually. I don't know why. Like I said, this particular map was created uh, by one of our students for this course. I don't know why he doesn't care about this not being available, but it's not a big deal if it's not being used. At some point, he's asking for it, but it doesn't show up. The rest of all these messages he actually created when he was programming just to make sure he knew what was going on, and we'll show that as a technique. You can actually write things out to the console, and that's what all this information is him writing things out to the console so that he knew when certain data was loaded onto the page. Okay, sources. I don't use this one too often, but sources kind of shows you where things are, what things are loaded onto the page, and it gives you all of the source code. And then network is the one that you're usually going to use for this lab. So when you see something loaded, you can look at the URL. I can open this up in a new URL, or I can just hover over it and see that it looks like these requests for data are coming from a server that's at gis.cmpd.org. So they're basically just running on the same server as the web server that's providing the other information. It's a network's the one you're going to use most for this lab. Any other questions? All right, 2B is the second assignment, week 2, assignment 2. This one is going to involve me doing a little demo here really quick. I'm going to do the demo in ArcGIS Online, and you're free to also do it in ArcGIS Online. And then, but you could also do it in CartoDB. I didn't have time to kind of prepare, so I haven't done it in CartoDB, and I'm not sure exactly how to do it. I don't want to spend time trying to figure it out, but if you want to, you can. CartoDB is kind of like ArcGIS Online, but it's created on an open source software stack. It is, though, a company that's producing it. Okay. So one of the things I want to show you is that there are resources for creating web maps that do not involve programming. Okay. Lots of times they're not as flexible, but they do exist out there. And ArcGIS Online and CartoDB are both examples of that. And so I'm not going to walk all the way through this, but I'm going to create data set. You could do it on Mapbox, you could do it on Google as well, but you have to make a web map using one of these existing tools. Okay. All right. So here we go. If you open up ArcGIS Online, well, you don't have to open up. I'm just going to show you here. So I'm going to go to ArcGIS Online. I'm going to close this guy. And you have to set up an account. If you want me to set up an account for you, I can do that. Just send me an email. Like I said, it'll get you a little bit. So you want to create a public account. It's got limited uses and capabilities. That's I kind of went over that really quickly, but here I could set up you under the University of Southern Mississippi, and basically you have some access to some services doing that you wouldn't otherwise. These are some students that were in a previous class. So if you do want me to do that for you, you just have to send me an email. But you can complete this assignment without that. You can just create a public account. All right. So if I go to map here, what I want you to do is choose a base map. In this case, I'm going to choose the oceans base map. And then I want you to add some data. You can add any data you want, but you could also add the data that I provided, which is this blue marlins track.csv. And the way that you do that is you say, I know there's a way to do it here. But the way that I've done it before is to just drag and drop it in. Okay. Now, you're going to get a message here that says the CSV surpasses the suggested limit of 1,000 features. Okay, because there are 1,000 features in this CSV. I'm going to say yes, that's fine. And what this did is these are actually blue marlin tracks and from different fish. And basically, I've just created a map like I would in ArcGIS, but I've done it on the web. Okay. So here's all of these blue marlin tracks, and right now it's symbolizing them based on the fish ID. The larger the fish ID, the larger the circle. Does that make any sense? I mean, it makes sense logically in your head, but does it really make sense to have a larger circle for a larger fish ID? Probably not, because fish ID is just the ID of that fish. So the marlin was tagged. This is data I got from the Nature Conservancy. And then it relayed the information as to where it was every so often. So really, just because you have a larger ID doesn't mean you're a bigger fish or anything. It's just serial. And so, you know, this fish was tagged later because it's a bigger number than these fish down here. So what I want you to do when I say make an interesting map is to choose something that might be more interesting, and then choose a symbology that would also be more interesting. So if I wanted to keep it with fish ID, one of the things I could do is change the options so that instead of, I think there's a way. Okay, yeah, so that's right here. Instead of choosing a symbol that changes in size based on the value, I could just use it to change the amount. So I'm gonna change it to this. Now, the fish ID is just a different color. So I could see, oh, this is where this fish went, and this fish went over here. And this fish went over into this area. So now I can see where the different fishes went. Okay, the different marlin. I don't know if marlin is marlin or marlins. Okay, here's some other options. I could do what's called a heat map. Now I could see where there were more marlin versus where there were less marlin. This is pretty interesting. Okay, and I could change the options to see if I could make it more or less interesting. Okay. Maybe change the area of influence a little bit. I think I like that a little bit. All right, change the transparency. Okay. All right, something like that. You can do unique symbols. So this is every single fish ID is a different color. That's probably actually more beneficial than the first one up here. But I've also got the opportunity to change things like day. And now I can look at where it went. Maybe I want to change it to this one with day. So now here's day 7 up to day 24. The problem is here I'm looking at multiple fish. So I probably want to change it so that I was only looking at one fish. And I don't know if there's a way to do that. Well, I do know that there's a way to do that. But let's, well, I don't know what it is. But one way to do that would be to actually go into Excel, and instead of uploading the entire data set, I could upload a data set for just one of the fish, or one of the fish at a time. So this is the raw data. Okay, we've got the raw data. Here's the fish ID. Here's the date, the month, the year. The only requirement for the data is that it has to be in this format, which is called a comma separated value file, a CSV file. And so for this lab, you're welcome to use this data, but you're also welcome to use any data that you want. All you need is for it to have a latitude and longitude, and then it will work. So here's the latitude, here's the longitude, and it'll work. Now, the numbers do need to be in decimal degrees. In other words, they can't be in degrees, minutes, and seconds. They need to be in decimal degrees. If anybody wants guidance on how to convert decimal degrees to degrees, minutes, and seconds, come talk to me. But it's pretty easy. You just convert. You take the degrees and you use that number, and then dot. You take the minutes. You divide that by 60, and then you take the seconds and you divide that by 3,600, and then you add all those numbers up. It would be complicated to do with a bunch of values, but you don't have to have a bunch of values for this lab. Like you could just have 10 values or 20 values, so you could calculate those numbers out. For example, let's create another file. So here I've got another file, and I could just say ID lat lon, and then I could come up with numbers: 32.5, 18.6, 33.5, 18, 17, and 45.6, 33. Okay. Say I had numbers like that: 1, 2, 3. Okay. So now in Excel, I can just go File, Save As, and remember I have to save it as the CSV. That's the only format it's going to take it in. So I go to CSV here, and I call this pretend data or something, and I'm going to save it. I have no idea where to put it. Save as. Looks like I put it in my documents. I've got it saved there in my documents, and now I'm just going to turn this blue marlins off, and I'm going to go to my documents, where it saved it. And my pretend data is right here, and I can drag and drop pretend data onto here. And you can see that one of my points is up here near the, what's the Crimea Peninsula, right? That's what that's called.
Yep.
That was all in the news a little while ago because of things. And then the other 2 points are down here in the southern Mediterranean, just north of Libya. But those were just points I randomly came up with. So let's say you had a small data set that you wanted to do. You could do that as well for this lab. Okay, you could find your data on Wikipedia. You could, I don't know, you had your own handheld GPS. You could go GPS a few points in and create a map. So the point here is to get some data into ArcGIS. And so one of the things that we'll show when we cover vector data over the next few weeks is getting CSV data into our web maps, because it's fairly easy. So what ArcGIS did isn't rocket science, but they're going to do the same thing we're going to do. They just have let's say maybe a prettier layout, but we're gonna figure out how they did it. The thing about a CSV is sometimes it's easier to read than that other format that I talked about before, the JSON format. And JSON is the format that it will actually need to be in for ArcGIS. I mean, sorry, for the web to understand it, but it can take care of the conversion. Talk about that a little next week. All right, so let's look at that assignment. So that's that. Okay, so then you're going to post this into the week 2 assignment. So I'll have a week 2 assignments in the forum. Post the link to your map. Oh, I thought that I had you do it in either or. Yeah, but it looks like I'm having you do it in both. Okay, that's probably a good idea. Won't go through a full demo of CartoDB, but I'll go through. CartoDB is now Carto. Yeah, like I said, I meant to make sure this worked. Let's see if I still have a password. All right, it logged me in. So here's my blue marlin checks that I made last time I taught this course. So the way that you can load data in here, this is set up a little bit different. 3 data sets. Okay, there. So it's under Connect Dataset, Data File. Add a file or URL, and you can add CSVs. So let's, because the blue marlin's already there, so let's go to my documents and upload my pretend data and connect that data set. So it works a little bit different in that your data sets you load up there, and then it has your data sets. There they are. And then you make a map with your data. But you could still do the same sort of thing. Here we've got, we'll talk about that later. Yeah, wizards. So here's the same kind of ability to make a map using different map types. So category is probably the best for this data. All right. Okay, so I do want you to kind of experiment and then create it. So it looks like you have to do this both in CartoDB and in ArcGIS online. Okay, so create a similar map in both so that you can do this. Compare and contrast the two websites for creating web maps. What are different symbology methods that each provided? What are different base map options? You saw I had a pretty crazy base map option in mine. So I have a student that just loves this base map. I think it's weird, and I would never use it, but it's kind of like supposed to be watercolor. I mean, the whole point of a base map that is simple is that it's not distracting, and in my opinion, this one's distracting. Anyway, there might be a very good reason for it for some data. Okay, so answer those questions, turn it in. Anybody have any questions about those two assignments? Okay. All right. So really quick here. I don't know if that was 40 minutes, but I'm going to